Good evening, my darlings. Settle in, find a comfortable chair, and let the quiet of the world wrap around you like a well-loved blanket. I'm Eleanor, but the name that truly sings in my heart is Nana. I've seen 82 seasons come and go, and my memory lane is a long and winding road, filled with sunny patches and some very dark woods. Tonight, I want to take you down a path from a chapter of my life I thought was sealed shut. A story that proves that the most earth-shattering truths can come from the softest whispers. But before we begin this journey, if you're listening to my old voice, would you do me a kindness? Please take a moment to press that little like button and subscribe to Nana's Memory Lane, and I so love to hear where you are in the world, so please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It warms my soul to know how far these memories can travel. Our story begins not with a thunderclap, but with a child's game, a nightly ritual that became the key to unlocking a living nightmare. It was the game my 7-year-old grandson, Leo, and I played before sleep claimed him. I spy with my little eye, I would begin, my voice a gentle sing-song, something that is green, his little face, a perfect map of his father's features and his mother's spirit, would scrunch up in that adorable way, his brow furrowed in the most serious concentration. But one rain-slicked Tuesday night, the game we played would save his mother's life and shatter our family into 1,000 pieces. That was the night Leo's turn came, and his voice, small and clear in the lamplit room, whispered the 7 words that stopped my world from turning. I spy Nana, something that makes mommy sleepy. Those words, spoken with the simple innocence only a child possesses, were a thread. And when I pulled on it, a monster unraveled. This was back in 2015, a year after my dear husband, Arthur, had left this world. The silence in our little house was a physical presence, a weight I couldn't bear. So, when my son, David, and his wife, Sarah, invited me to move in with them, it felt like a lifeline. Their home in the suburbs was a symphony of life, the thud of Leo's sneakers on the hardwood floors, the scent of Sarah's oil paints, the low hum of David's voice on the phone. Being there in the heart of my family began to mend the fractured pieces of my grieving heart. David was everything a mother could wish for in a son. He was a respected pharmacist in our town, the man people trusted with their health and their worries. He had a gentle, steady presence that was a balm to those around him. When he looked at his wife, Sarah, his eyes held a universe of adoration. And Sarah, well, Sarah was the daughter I'd always longed for. She was a whirlwind of creativity and laughter, an artist whose canvases were as vibrant and full of life as she was. Their love story was the kind people wrote about, a beautiful, seamless tapestry, or so it appeared, over the last year. A subtle, creeping fog had begun to descend upon our home, and its epicenter was Sarah. Her light, once so brilliant, was dimming. It started with a profound weariness, a fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure. Then came the forgetfulness. She'd leave the stove on, misplace her keys, or lose her train of thought mid-sentence. Soon after, the dizzy spells began, sudden waves of vertigo that would have her clutching the back of a chair. Her knuckles white, her face pale and beaded with sweat, we embarked on a medical odyssey. A frustrating pilgrimage from one specialist to another. They ran blood tests, MRIs, and neurological exams. They peered into her eyes and tapped her knees with little rubber hammers. Each time, the results were the same, inconclusive. Chronic fatigue syndrome, one doctor suggested, scribbling a prescription. Perhaps fibromyalgia, another mused, offering pamphlets for pain management. They treated the symptoms, but the disease itself remained a ghost, an invisible thief stealing the woman we loved. Through it all, David was a pillar of strength, the very portrait of a devoted husband. His every action seemed steeped in love and concern. He researched alternative therapies, brewed her special herbal teas he claimed would fight inflammation, and prepared complex morning smoothies packed with exotic supplements and vitamins. He took over the meticulous management of her prescriptions, lining up the bottles on the counter. "We just need to find the right balance, the right combination," he'd say, his brow furrowed with worry. "We'll get you back, Sarah, I promise." I watched him with a mother's pride. I saw a man fighting a desperate battle for his wife, a loving husband navigating an impossible storm. I was a fool. I saw what I wanted to see, not what was right in front of me. That fateful Tuesday night, the rain beat a soft rhythm against the window panes. Our game of I Spy had been particularly adventurous. We had spied our way through the living room and the kitchen, and now Leo, giggling with a mischievous glint in his eyes, declared we must play in his parents' bedroom. Sarah was downstairs, dozing on the sofa, a light blanket pulled up to her chin. "I spy something." "Secret," Leo chirped, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He took my hand, his small fingers warm in mine, and led me to his father's tall mahogany chest of drawers. He tugged at the bottom drawer, the one filled with David's neatly rolled socks. He reached deep into the back, past the thick woolens for winter and the dark dress socks for work, and pointed. "There," he said, his little finger indicating a space between two bulky pairs of hiking socks. Tucked away, almost invisible in the shadows, was a small, dark brown glass vial. "It was no bigger than my thumb. That's Daddy's secret," Leo whispered, his eyes wide as saucers. "He said it's very special medicine for Mommy, and I must never, ever touch it." A strange, cold unease prickled my skin. It felt clandestine, but I quickly chided myself. "Eleanor, stop it. A man is allowed his privacy." It was likely some expensive, concentrated herbal extract he'd ordered from a specialist in Germany, something he didn't want accidentally spilled or broken. I smiled at Leo, tousled his hair, and steered our game towards spying his blue dinosaur lamp. But after I had tucked Leo into bed, read him a chapter of his adventure book, and kissed his warm forehead, I couldn't shake the image of that little bottle. An instinct, a deep, primal knowing honed over 82 years of life, of loving and losing, of raising a child and watching the world, was screaming at me. Something was wrong. My heart thudded against my ribs like a trapped bird. I told myself I was being ridiculous, a silly old woman letting her imagination run wild. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It was a physical presence in the room. With hands that felt disconnected from my body, I crept back into the master bedroom. The only light was a sliver from the hallway, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. I knelt and opened the drawer, the wood sliding silently. My fingers, trembling, found the vial. It was cool to the touch. I carried it into the dim light of the hallway, my breath held tight in my chest. It wasn't a herbal supplement. The label was old and partially scratched, as if someone had deliberately tried to obscure it. But I could make out a few letters of a complex chemical name I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. Beneath the faded lettering, printed in a stark, menacing red, was a tiny symbol that sent a bolt of pure, icy terror through me. A skull and crossbones. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. The vial slipped from my numb fingers and thankfully landed softly on the plush runner. David, my David, a pharmacist. He knew, with absolute certainty, what that symbol meant. It meant danger. It meant poison. And he was hiding it, calling it special medicine. The world tilted, and I leaned against the wall for support, my mind a chaotic storm of denial and horrifying realization. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. This was David, my gentle son, the boy who once cried for a week when he accidentally stepped on a snail. But then, the scattered, puzzle pieces of the last year began to fly together, clicking into place with a horrifying, magnetic force. Sarah's inexplicable illness, the constellation of symptoms that baffled a dozen doctors. Her constant, debilitating fatigue. The confusion. The dizziness. David's unwavering insistence on preparing her food, his ever-present smoothies and special teas. The secret bottle of medicine, the game was over. My grandson, in his perfect innocence, had spied the truth, and now I was its keeper. Burdened with a secret so monstrous, so poisonous, it had the power to utterly destroy my family, my son, and everything I had ever held dear. My first instinct was to run into the living room, to shake Sarah awake, to scream. My second was to confront David the moment he came home. But a cold, sharp clarity cut through the panic. If my deepest, most unthinkable fear was true, then my son was not just a liar. He was a meticulous planner, a man capable of a cold, sustained, and calculated deception. A direct accusation would be a fatal mistake. He would deny it, destroy the evidence, and perhaps accelerate his timeline. I could be putting Sarah, Leo, and even myself in immediate, mortal danger. No, I had to be smarter than him. I had to be as calm and methodical as he was. I carefully placed the vial back into its hiding place, my hands shaking so violently that the simple task felt like threading a needle in an earthquake. I retreated to my room and sat in my rocking chair, the one Arthur had bought me for our 40th anniversary. I did not sleep. I sat in the crushing darkness, the familiar sounds of the house now alien and sinister. Each creak of the floorboards, each groan of the pipes, was a whisper of the evil that lived within these walls. My son, the boy I had nourished and raised, the man whose first steps I had witnessed, was a monster hiding in plain sight. And his wife, the vibrant, loving woman I cherished as a daughter, was his unwitting victim, slowly being erased from the world. The next few days were the most difficult performance of my life. I became an actress, playing the part of the slightly forgetful but helpful grandmother, while every nerve in my body screamed in protest. I watched David with a new, terrifying clarity. I observed the meticulous way he measured powders and liquids for Sarah's morning smoothie, the way his back was always slightly turned, shielding his actions from view. I saw the gentle, loving smile he gave her as he handed her the glass, a smile that now looked like a grotesque mask. I had to get a sample of that smoothie. I had to have irrefutable proof. A suspicion, even one as strong as a physical certainty, was not enough to put a man in prison, especially not a man as respected as my son. My chance came on Friday morning. I woke before dawn, my mind a whirring engine of plans and contingencies. I went to the kitchen and found the bag of frozen mango and pineapple he often used. I took out my own blender and made a smoothie that was identical in color and consistency, using only fruit, yogurt, and a splash of orange juice. I poured it into a glass that matched the one he always used for Sarah. When David came down, I was already bustling around the kitchen, pretending to be searching for my favorite tea tin. "Morning, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. The casual affection felt like a hot brand on my skin. I watched from the corner of my eye as he began his ritual. He took out the blender, added the fruit, then reached into a high cabinet for a container of what he called protein powder. He then added a few drops of a liquid from an unlabeled bottle. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. "Oh, David, darling, could you be a dear?" I called out, my voice high and a little shaky. The television remote seems to have fallen behind the sofa, and my old back won't let me reach it. It was a flimsy excuse, but it worked. He sighed, a small, put-upon sound. "Of course, Mom," as he walked into the living room and knelt to feel behind the sofa cushions. I moved with a speed I didn't know I possessed. In seconds, I had swapped the glasses. His poisoned smoothie was now in my hand. I poured it into an old, empty jam jar I'd prepared, screwed the lid on tight, and shoved it deep into my oversized handbag, behind my wallet and knitting. When he returned, I was sipping my tea, his healthy smoothie sitting on the counter, waiting for Sarah. "Found it," he said, placing the remote on the coffee table. "Oh, thank you, dear." "You're a lifesaver," I replied, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. Later that morning, After David had left for the pharmacy, I told Sarah I was going to visit an old friend in the next state, a woman she'd heard me speak of many times. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was a necessary poison. I drove for 2 hours, the jam jar sitting on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I had found a private laboratory online, one that specialized in industrial and private toxicology. I paid the hefty fee in cash, using the emergency fund Arthur and I had kept tucked away in a biscuit tin for decades. I gave the blank-faced technician a false name. I suspect an employee is contaminating a food product of my small business, I explained. The fabricated story feeling clumsy and thin, he nodded, unconcerned with my reasons. What are we looking for? Everything, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I need a full, comprehensive screen. For anything and everything that shouldn't be in a fruit smoothie, that will take time. 48 hours, maybe 72 for a full report, he said, labeling the jar. Those 48 hours were a form of psychological torture. Every ring of the phone made me jump. Every moment Sarah was alone with David was a risk I was forcing her to take. I hovered, I fussed, I intercepted. I made elaborate lunches and dinners, insisting Sarah eat my cooking. You need some good old-fashioned home cooking. Darling, not these fancy powders, I'd say with a cheerful wave of my hand. David watched me with a flicker of annoyance, his control over his wife's diet being gently usurped, but he said nothing. The call came on Wednesday afternoon as I was folding laundry. It was an unknown number. I took the cordless phone into my bedroom and shut the door. This is John Riley from Accutox Labs, the voice on the other end said, professional and detached. We have the preliminary results on the sample you provided. I held my breath. Ma'am, he continued, and there was a new note of gravity in his voice. We found something. A significant concentration of a substance called colchicine. It's a medication derived from the autumn crocus plant, typically used in small, controlled doses for gout. He paused. In the dosage present in this sample, it's a slow-acting, cumulative poison. It causes gastrointestinal distress, weakness, confusion, and eventually organ failure. Its symptoms are insidious and closely mimic those of various autoimmune diseases. It is very, very difficult to detect in standard hospital blood work unless you are specifically looking for it. I sank onto my bed, the phone slipping in my sweaty palm. The world dissolved into a muted hum. It was real. It was all real. My son, my child, was poisoning his wife to death, one smoothie at a time. The lab technician's clinical description was a perfect match for the hell Sarah had been living for the past year. I hung up the phone, a cold, hard resolve solidifying in my heart. The time for suspicion and secrecy was over. The time for action was now. I had the proof. I had the weapon I needed to save her. Now I had to lay the trap. That evening, I set the stage. I waited until Leo was sound asleep, his soft snores a gentle rhythm from down the hall. Sarah was in the living room, curled on her favorite armchair with a book, looking noticeably brighter and more alert after several days of my untainted food and care. I saw David in the kitchen, moving with his usual quiet efficiency. He was brewing a cup of chamomile tea. For Sarah, his nightly ritual of care. My moment was now. I took a deep breath, clutching the folded, printed lab report in the pocket of my cardigan. My phone was also in my pocket, already on an open call with my daughter, Margaret, David's older sister. She lived 3 hours away, and I had called her after the lab results came in, laying out the entire, horrifying story. She was waiting, her hand hovering over the number for the local police department in my town, ready to make the call the second I gave the signal. I walked into the kitchen. My steps felt heavy, as if I were wading through deep water. David turned as I entered, a pleasant, easy smile on his face. It was the same smile he'd had since he was a boy, but now it looked like something alien, a mask of flesh hiding the void. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice soft. "Just making some calming tea for Sarah before bed. I don't think she'll be needing that," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady, clear, and cold. I pulled the lab report from my pocket and laid it flat on the granite countertop between us. He glanced down, his expression one of mild curiosity. He saw the lab's letterhead, then his eyes scanned the text. I watched as his brain processed the words, toxicology screen. Sample, smoothie, fruit, result, culture scene. Concentration, lethal over sustained period. The colour drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. The pleasant smile evaporated, and the gentle husband mask dissolved. In its place was the raw, primal terror of a trapped animal. The teacup he was holding began to rattle violently in its saucer. "Mom," he stammered, his eyes wide, darting from the report to my face. I don't. I can explain this. There is no explanation for this, David," I said, and now my voice broke, shattered by a sorrow so profound it felt like a physical weight in my chest. "There are no words for what you have done. There are only consequences." He stared at me, his eyes pleading. For a fleeting, agonizing second, I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep in my arms, the teenager who I taught to drive, the young man I watched graduate with honors. But that image was brutally eclipsed by the vision of Sarah, pale and fading, and of my grandson, Leo. Growing up without a mother, he collapsed into a kitchen chair, the teacup clattering to the floor, miraculously not breaking. He buried his face in his hands, and a terrible, gut-wrenching sob tore from his throat, a sound of utter self-destruct. In a torrent of broken words and weeping, he confessed everything. The online trading addiction he'd hidden, the catastrophic financial losses, the secret, high-interest loans, the forged signatures, and finally, the life insurance policy. He saw it as his only way out, a twisted, insane logic that had convinced him that his wife's slow, painful death was preferable to the shame of financial ruin. As he sobbed, I took my phone from my pocket, never taking my eyes off the broken man who was my son. I brought it to my lips and whispered one final, heartbreaking word to my waiting daughter. Now, the rest of the night is a fractured mosaic of memory. The wail of sirens growing closer, a sound that seemed to be coming from my own heart. The flashing red and blue lights painting chaotic patterns on our living room walls. The quiet, solemn faces of the police officers as they entered our home, their presence a violation of all that was sacred. They took the teacup. They took the vial from his drawer. They took the jam jar I'd saved in the fridge. And then they took my son. I watched from the doorway as they led him out in handcuffs, his shoulders slumped, his face a hollow mask of shame and utter despair. He didn't look at me as they put him in the back of the patrol car. The family tapestry, once so beautiful, was now just a pile of severed threads at my feet. The hardest part was still to come. After the police had gone and a deafening silence had reclaimed the house, I had to be the one to tell Sarah. I found her standing in the hallway, her face a question mark of confusion and fear. I led her to the sofa, sat beside her, and took her cold hands in mine. And then, word by painful word, I explained the unthinkable. The illness that wasn't an illness. The care that was a curse. The love that was a lie. I watched the dawning horror in her eyes, a wound so deep I felt it in my own soul. Her husband, the man she had built her life with, the father of her child, had been trying to murder her. The aftermath was a long, slow, arduous climb out of a deep, dark pit. David was tried and sentenced to 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Our family name was splashed across the local news. Our private tragedy turned into a lurid public horror story. The pharmacist who poisoned his wife. Friends we'd had for decades crossed the street to avoid us. Neighbors' curtains would twitch when Sarah or I left the house. We were pariahs marked by a scandal not of our making. but in the heart of that wreckage, something resilient began to grow. Sarah, once the poison was flushed from her system and her physical strength returned, discovered a core of steel within herself she never knew she possessed. We grieved together, not for the man David had become, but for the loving husband and devoted son we thought we knew. We held each other through the long, tear-filled nights and found the courage to face the whispers and stares of the town together. We sold the house, that beautiful home that was now just a crime scene, and moved to a small, rented apartment, starting over with nothing but a few boxes of belongings and a shared, unbreakable trauma. Our entire world narrowed to a single focus. Leo. We had to protect his innocence while somehow explaining an impossible, monstrous truth. We told him, with the help of a child psychologist, that his father was very sick in his mind and had done a terrible thing that hurt Mommy, and that he had to go away for a long time to get help. We built a fortress of love and stability around him, a new family unit forged in the fire of betrayal, a mother and a grandmother who would move heaven and earth for him today. Nearly 10 years have passed. The path from that dark wood has been long, but it has led us to a place of unexpected light. Sarah returned to her art, and her canvases became her therapy. All the pain, the betrayal, the resilience, and the hope poured out of her and onto the canvas. She is now a renowned artist, her work celebrated for its raw emotional power. She never remarried, finding fulfillment and peace in her work and in raising her son. Leo is now a tall, compassionate, and brilliant young man of 17, getting ready to head off to college to study psychology. He knows the full truth now, and he carries that heavy knowledge with a quiet grace and a deep empathy that astounds me. He made the decision, on his own, to visit his father in prison once a month. He says he needs to understand, to see the man, not just the monster. As for me, I am still Nana. I live with Sarah and Leo in a bright, cheerful home filled not with secrets and lies, but with the scent of turpentine and oil paint, with the sound of Leo practicing his guitar, and with the constant, comforting warmth of unconditional love. My son is a grey-haired man in a prison uniform, a stranger I write to out of a lingering sense of maternal duty. The love I have for the boy he was is forever tangled with an inconsolable grief for the son I lost. I often think back to that simple bedtime game, to the quiet rustle of Leo's pajamas and the soft glow of his dinosaur lamp. A child's innocent eyes saw what all the adults, all the doctors, had missed. I spy something that makes Mommy sleepy, a little game that unmasked a big monster, a child's whisper that roared like a lion and saved a life. It was a brutal, heartbreaking lesson that taught me that strength isn't about being immune to pain or never breaking. It's about having the courage to painstakingly gather up your shattered pieces and build something new, something stronger. In the very place where you were broken, thank you for walking with me down this difficult part of my memory lane. If my story has touched you in any way, please leave a like and perhaps share it with someone who needs a reminder that we all possess an incredible strength to protect the ones we love. Subscribe to Nana's Memory Lane for more of my stories. And now I ask you, my darlings, tell me in the comments, has a small, almost insignificant moment ever altered the entire course of your life? A loving hug from this old Nana, who learned that sometimes you must be willing to let your world burn down to save what truly matters most in it. Until next time.